Let us pray. God of covenantal love, you pledged your faithfulness and steadfast love to Abraham and Sarah as they forged a new nation, blessed to be a blessing to all the earth. You pledged yourself to David, set apart to rule, and to Jesus, whose way of love was victorious over death itself. In all the world's peoples, cultures, and religions, you have provided a witness of your faithfulness and steadfast love. We ask your presence among us this evening as we pledge our own faithfulness and steadfast love to a new entering class. Amen.
Good evening, Union College, and you may be seated. Thank you, Reverend Miller and Union Harmony. As we begin this evening, please take just a moment to silence your phone, tablet, or any other electronic device you may have with you this evening. Welcome to the opening Fall Convocation 2023. Where we will celebrate our circles ceremony with you, our incoming class. I wish to take a moment to introduce those on stage with me this evening. Please stand as you are recognized. Reverend Tom Brown, First United Methodist Church of Barberville. Mr. Carlos Sanz, Student Government Association President. Dr. Marcia Hawkins, President of Union College. Reverend David Miller, College Minister and Executive Director of Spiritual Life and Social Justice Initiatives. Dr. Christine Marley Frederick, Professor of Communications. Miss Skylar Carnes, she's Student Ambassador, Senior here at Union, and she will be leading the Student Pledge this evening. And I am Dr. Marisa Greer, Executive Vice President and Provost. Yeah. Circles, celebration, integrity, responsibility, civility, lifelong learning, engagement, and spirituality. Members of the Union community will recognize the shared values of circles. Convocation offers us the opportunity to gather and affirm these values. This tradition, now in its 17th year, is a partnership of college and community as we pledge our support to the success of our incoming class. This is also a time when we ask this new class to give us their pledge to work diligently and honorably to reach their education goals. Congratulations, class of 2027, for making the wise decision to go to college and the even wiser decision to come to Union. We are very happy to have all of you here, and we wish each of you great success as a Union College student. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I am thrilled to see your smiling, energetic faces. It's a beautiful evening in Barberville, Kentucky. You know, we, faculty and staff in the community, look forward to this time of year because the summer is just so dull and boring without you. So you come in the fall and bring all this excitement and maybe a little anxiety, and We really appreciate it. We appreciate our returning students continuing their journey with us, and we appreciate our new students coming to start their journey here. You know, I hope during your time at Union that you will make every effort to meet new friends and to go on new adventures, to try new things. Union is a safe place to learn about different cultures and different people. So the last time I counted, our student body represented 33 different states, and 35 different countries. That's incredible. So Yeah. So reach out to each other and learn about each other and learn what it means to be a thoughtful, caring, global citizen. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. Entering his 27th year at Union, Dr. Russell Sisson teaches classes in religion, history, and philosophy, and is the coach of Union's men's and women's golf teams. Dr. Sisson was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, where he attended Christian Brothers High School, earned a BA in Classics at Rhodes. He went on to earn a Master of Divinity at Yale and a Doctor of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Emory. He has taught at Emory, Columbia Theological Seminary, and Murray State. He regularly presents papers at regional and national meetings of the Society of Biblical Literature and has presented papers on rhetoric and biblical interpretation at conferences in Sweden, Germany, and South Africa. He has served as associate editor of the journal Conversations with the Biblical World and currently is on the editorial board of Emory's Studies in Early Christianity. Dr. Sisson is an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. He teaches in the church's course of study, which is an academic curriculum for lay ministers serving Methodist churches. And he currently serves as part-time minister of the First Presbyterian Church in Middlesboro. I encourage you to read the more thorough bio printed in your program. For now, please welcome the 2023 recipient of the Excellence in Teaching Award, Dr. Russell Sisson.
Thank you. I'm going to begin with a question. You can raise your hand if you can answer yes here, but try to answer the question. Do you remember the last time someone asked you, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I'm going to guess for some of you it may have been around kindergarten, maybe elementary school. The key word there is grown up. Once we are deemed to be grown up, people don't ask us that question anymore. They'll ask us questions like, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? Or what are you going to do when you get out of college? If it gets much later than that, they're going to say things like, when are you going to get your life together? But I don't think they're going to ask the question, what are you going to do when you grow up? Well, I have a very clear memory when I was last asked that question. Believe it or not, I was 34 years old. And I was in the car with my son, who was 5 years old at the time, and he looked up at me and right out of the blue said, "Dad, what are you going to do when you grow up?" It takes a little thought to know where to begin to answer that question. I think my immediate reaction was to say, well, I think I am, but I knew that wouldn't work. He wouldn't have asked the question if he thought I was. So what came to me, and it was perhaps because we were in the car, and we had had car conversations quite a while. I could remember when he was in a child's seat in the back seat, and about all he could see looking out the side windows were trucks that passed. He would regularly ask the question, where's the truck going? He did that with my wife, he did it with me, and when he would ask my wife that, she knew that she better give a long, detailed answer, or else every time there was a truck, she was going to ask, what's the truck doing? So if it was a food truck, she'd start with the farm where something was raised, and then she would talk about food processing, and then get to the truck and transportation, eventually get around to the grocery store where it would be found. And that seemed to work. I wasn't quite that creative. In fact, I've kidded my wife after these stories she would tell him she should have written a book, Where's the Truck Going? Economics for Toddlers. But one time he asked that question, and he asked me first, and I guess maybe because I was driving and all I could see was what was in the rearview mirror in the side window. I had to say, well, Max, I'm really not sure I know what truck that is. And his response is, that's okay, I'll ask Mom if she knows. I got permission to share that story, provided I told that last detail. So, but we had fun with that, so my answer to him was, well, I think I'll be a truck driver, but I don't know what kind, or we had agreed we would just kind of think about that and continue the conversation. But in the back of my mind, unrelated to his question, I was at a point where I was playing what I call the what-if game. And if you've never done this, you will. I'm pretty sure you will. I'm speaking particularly to those of you who are college students. Once you get settled in a career and you think things are going pretty well, you got your education behind you, you've earned your degrees. You might have earned a degree that gives you a title you can put before your name, or you may have earned a degree or certification that allows you to put what the humorist Louis Grizzard, who a few may know as, he called it alphabet soup at the end of your name. You're going to feel you've crossed the finish line. Everything's settled. It's ready to settle in and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But then you begin to have doubts. And there were times, really beginning about this time in my own life, when I was wondering if what I was beginning to do was what I should be doing, or what might come from it. So I began what's gone on really almost up to the present day. There are those days, don't ask me to elaborate, but there are those days when you catch yourself and you say, now what if I had done this, or what if I had done that? And I've decided to pose that question and try to have a little bit of fun with it, because these are tied to experiences I had in college. So for those of you who are college students, I'm going to talk about some experiences I had and suggest you might have similar experiences. Now, some of these are different. We're going to have to use our imaginations here. How many of you have roommates right now, college roommates? Good. I don't need to ask this question. I assume everybody has a cell phone. Imagine a world where there are no cell phones. If you're out of the room and miss a call, you missed a call, and you don't even know you missed it. Unless you have a roommate who answers the phone and takes a message for you. I'll be getting back to that. How many of you listen to music on your phones or some device that is entirely yours, and you've got headphones or earplugs, and you and your roommate can sit in the room and each listen to your own music. Not the case when I was in college. People had stereos, and if two people had a stereo, well, you don't even want to think about what it sounds like when two people are trying to play their favorite music on the stereo at the same time. If you were me, you simply listened to the music that your roommate wanted to play. And I had a very interesting roommate. He was into country music. I was not. I may be one of the few people who knows the words to every Merle Haggard song without being... Notice who's laughing. Some of y'all are going, who's that? Sorry, that's the best I can do. But I think you get the point. Well, this sets the background for my first what if. When I finished my senior year in college, I had a chance to work for the college radio station. Not being a disc jockey, that's what everybody wanted to be able to do. I simply read news. Back in the day, they had a AP teletype machine that was just constantly churning out news. I'd tear it off. I'd go back with pens and highlighters and create a little story or two or three that would fill up about 5 minutes, record it, make a tape, hand it to the disc jockey, and that would be the afternoon news. There was somebody working with me who did, not with me, but he did the same job in the morning. He was also a student. His name was Ripley. Now, that was not his given name. It was not a family name. It was not the name that his parents gave him. He played football, and his football teammates called him Ripley after Ripley's Believe It or Not. If you've never heard of that, it's a whole franchise. They've even got, I think they've got a Believe It or Not museum down in Gatlinburg or somewhere. It's still around, started in the 1940s. Stories of the odd that are true. And Ripley was called Ripley because he came up with some very outlandish stories, particularly about his ability as a football player. The story is he was the fourth string running back on a football team that only had 2 strings. But he was good-natured. He didn't mind being called Ripley. And he worked at this same radio station. And he fashioned himself or saw himself becoming a sports reporter. Now, I got to say a little bit more about this radio station. It's what then and today is called an alternative radio station. It did not play popular music. Disc jockeys would go to albums that were favorites and pull out what they would call the hidden gems on albums. It was a different kind of music station. And the people who listened were the same way about the news. We would get letters. Part of the job, we didn't get paid for it. It was all, volunteer work, but kind of fun. And that's one of my what ifs. I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. But it led to some another experience that kind of falls into the what if. Ripley managed to get press passes for sporting events in the city of Memphis. We had a minor league baseball team. He got 2 press passes so I could go with him. We went free of charge to baseball games. I know an usher who let us sit in the box seats. Probably shouldn't have been so greedy, but I was, and that was a treat. And then when the professional golf tournament came into town, I was invited by Ripley to sit with him at a table in the press room he had requested. Now, you got to process this. I may be... I've said enough where maybe you can. This is not a radio station where people who listen to it are concerned with sports, much less golf. If the people in the press room had known what kind of radio station we were, they would have thrown us out. But they didn't know that. So we had a table in the press room right next to CBS Sports. Pat Summerall was the announcer. If you've never heard the name Pat Summerall, he's a Hall of Fame sports announcer. I think he covered or broadcasted some 16 Super Bowls, 26 Masters golf tournaments, and maybe 21 U.S. Opens, if I get it right. And he was there, and he was being interviewed about his life. Now, Pat Summerall had played football. He had played professional football for the New York Giants in the late 50s, early 60s. And he was roommates. This gets back to people in a room having to share a phone. He shared a phone with a football player by the name of Frank Gifford. If you don't know Frank Gifford from football, you may know his wife, Kathy Lee, from Regis and Kathy Lee. I'm trying to connect with as many as I can here. He became kind of a TV celebrity, you might say, after his football days. In CBS Sports, they had identified him as a future sportscaster, but he was not in the room. Pat Summerall was. All Pat Summerall did was answer the phone, say, "Pat's not here, could I take a message?" And then the person said, "Why don't you come in for an audition?" And as they say, the rest is history. They saw just in a few words out of somebody who was a place kicker on a football team, a possible sports broadcaster. And he goes on to be a Hall of Fame sportscaster. Another story from my last year of college, and this gets back to having to share a phone and take messages. My roommate, who I've already told you a little bit about, decided he didn't do this, but he was thinking he might go into the Navy and go through officer training school. So we got a call from a naval recruiter. He was not in. I took the message. And the naval recruiter said, "Well, tell me something about yourself. What do you major in?" And I just said I majored in foreign language. He goes, "Oh, that's great. We need encryptors, people who decipher codes and break codes." And I didn't take it that seriously because, I knew where I was going, and that was not it. But that, too, kind of stuck in my mind. And sometimes, and I don't know what causes me to do this, but I will wonder, well, what if I had done that? I actually have some interest in that, and the next story I'm going to tell you is about someone whose story I saw on television, and I've done a little research and found out more about her. It's actually quite more remarkable than Pat Summerall. It's a woman by the name of Elizabeth Smith Friedman. She grew up in Indiana in the early 1900s, went to college as an English major, and also studied Greek, Latin, and German, so that's important for the next part. And she eventually went to the city of Chicago looking for work, and she was in a library. The same time, this very wealthy man by the name of George Fibion was there. And the librarian, she asked the librarian, she goes, I'm out of college, I'm looking for work, can you help me find any? And she had been looking at some Shakespeare editions in the library. And the librarian directed her to this very rich man who, it turns out, had his own kind of early version of what we today call a think tank. He paid people just to sit around and work on projects. Many of them were scientific and I think fairly reputable. But the project that interested him in her is he believed that the works of William Shakespeare were actually written by a philosopher by the name of Francis Bacon. And there were these encrypted messages, and he wanted somebody to find the encrypted messages. Now, that could just be a bizarre story in the end of Elizabeth's story, but then something happened. War broke out. First World War. There were no people around. Actually, I think there were about 2 or 3 left over from the Civil War who knew how to write code and to break code. So they go to this think tank and they recruit her and a man who will eventually become her husband to be code breakers during the First World War. The war ends. She goes to work for the Coast Guard, and she's cracking codes used by drug smugglers, which carries us up to the Second World War. And this is often left out in a lot of history books about the Second World War. But the Germans were trying to establish friendly governments in South America from which they could launch a land attack against the United States. And she was instrumental in training the code breakers that infiltrated that spy network and stopped that from happening. Now, the reason why much of her story is not known is it was top secret for a long time, and a certain amount of time had to pass. So, back to the what ifs. Now, I never imagined I would be a Pat Summerall. I never imagined I would be a code breaker. And as I'm talking to you, some of you probably don't imagine you would have experiences like Pat Summerall did or like Elizabeth Smith Friedman had. But you never know. As much as we try to plan out our lives, there are certain things we cannot plan on. Now, there's two things you can do. You can just sort of sit around and do nothing and wait for or not absolutely nothing, but do very little and just wait for these out-of-the-blue moments to come upon you so you can seize them when they happen. Or you can plod along and work along at what you've already set your mind on doing. What I'm going to suggest is in life we need to do both, whether you're a college student or whether you're someone who's been out of college for a while. Growing up goes on. And the key to growing up is being open to options, but realizing that there are a lot of things we have no control over. And sometimes the best we can do is stick with choices we have already made that have brought us to college and have set us on a path. And that's not always easy to do. Sometimes when the going gets tough, it's easy to play the what-if game and say, well, I made a wrong decision, I need to leave, I need to go do something else. But part of life is being tested. It's having our resolve tested. As was said in the introduction, I coach golf, I play golf, and we have a saying in golf I'm going to share with you now. It's called, you play the ball as it lies. If your ball goes into the tall grass, which is called rough, you don't pick the ball up and move it to a nice lie, you play it as it lies. If your ball goes behind a tree, you play the ball as it lies. And one of the best examples from the history of golf of both the challenge of this rule and the rewards of learning how to play by it is a man by the name of Bobby Jones. And I'm going to end by telling you the Bobby Jones story. Bobby Jones was an amateur golfer back in the 1920s. Between 1923 and 1930, he won 14 major championships as an amateur. During that time, he went to school and received an education, 2 degrees, and was starting on a 3rd. He first earned a degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. He was from Atlanta. He then went to Harvard and got a degree in English. Curiously, even though he was the reigning U.S. Open champion, he was not allowed to play on the Harvard golf team. It seemed he was not up to the standards of being a Harvard man because he had gotten a degree in mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech before he came to Harvard. But he was quite happy just to be the equipment manager for the golf team, even as a reigning U.S. Open champion. In the midst of winning tournaments, he once did something which just amazed people. He called a penalty on himself. He was addressing the ball moved. That's a penalty. Doesn't matter how much or the reason. If in taking a stance by the ball and it moves, that's a penalty. The golfers he was playing with, and this is the national championship, I mean, stakes are pretty high, they said, oh, you don't have to do that. That's, if it didn't significantly change the lie of your ball, just ignore it. And he says, no, it's a rule. So he called a penalty on himself. As a result of that one-stroke penalty, he instead of winning by one stroke, tied and then lost a playoff the next day. And the press made a big deal about it. They said, "What integrity? Calling a penalty on yourself at the cost of losing a major championship." And Jones was actually offended by this. He said, "You might as well give me an award for not robbing a bank." He was also, I didn't finish his education, he went on to Emory Law School and passed the Georgia bar exam before graduating, so after his amateur golf career, he was a lawyer. And he became an example of integrity, not only in athletics, but beyond athletics into life. Late in his life, he contracted a disease which made him crippled. It was a degeneration of the spine. At first, he had to walk with a walker. Then he had to be in a wheelchair, and in the last years of his life, he was bedridden. Before the disease had progressed too far, a friend of his approached him, and the friend said, "I know you're sick. How sick are you?" And Jones said, "I'm going to tell you this one time, and we will never discuss the matter again. I'm losing the ability to walk. I will eventually be bound to a wheelchair, and if I live long enough, I will be bedridden." And then to his friend, he said, "In life as in golf, we play the ball as it lies." So how do we hold together these two ideas? That the challenges we meet in life are challenges we are meant to overcome. They are tests of our character, our virtue, our integrity, a test of our perseverance. And yet, at the same time, be open to the possibility that there is something in the cards for us that we are unaware of, and probably no one else is aware of it either. It's just an opportunity that's going to emerge one day. This is a lot to think about as you are beginning college. I'm not alone here. I know some of my colleagues well enough, and some people on the staff here well enough to know many of us have had these periods where we've asked the what-if questions. Many of us have our own stories. They may not be the same people I've told you stories about, but we know stories of people who had these completely unexpected encounters with opportunity. And they went on to do great things. And then we also know those people who just grind it out day by day, playing the ball as it lies. I'm going to end by sharing with you some advice of sorts that I had when I was in high school. My high school geometry teacher was named Coach Pratt. He was also my basketball coach at the same time he was my geometry teacher. And he had two signs up on the wall. One of the signs said, "When all else fails, follow directions." Now that's pretty simple and straightforward. Came in handy on a geometry test. It also came in handy on the basketball court unless you wanted to run a drill called ladders. Any basketball players know about running ladders? Okay. You must not be in very good shape if you've never had to run ladders. He had a way of getting our attention if we were not following directions. But the other sign that was up right underneath that, and all my life I've tried to find the connection. I knew him well enough to believe he saw a connection, was a passage from the Bible. And I'm going to have to put on my glasses here and read because it's in the small print. Some of you perhaps have heard this before. It's from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. "When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to my childish ways. That's what Coach Pratt had, along with when all else fails, follow directions. But there's actually more to what Paul writes that I want to read. This is the next verse. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. Paul's not talking about ordinary growing up. He's talking about growing up with the understanding, an understanding rooted in faith, that just as you are surrounded by friends who are sharing your journey, just as you are surrounded by parents who are sharing your journey and teachers and staff members here, and for the rest of your life, you're going to be surrounded by people. You're going to be sharing other people's journeys as they share yours. If our hearts and minds are open and receptive, God is part of our journey.
Members of the faculty, will you please stand? The faculty of Union College have a responsibility to teach the academic disciplines in a manner that inspires our students to embody the core values represented by circles: celebration, integrity, responsibility, civility, learning, engagement, and spirituality. We, the faculty of Union College, accept our responsibility and affirm our commitment to the core values represented by circles. Thank you, faculty. You may be seated.
Will the staff of Union College please stand? I know you're here. Thank you. The staff and administration of Union College have a responsibility to provide service and support for all aspects of the college experience, and to do so in a manner that manifests the core values represented by circles and encourages our students to make these values their own. We, the staff and administration of Union College, accept our responsibility and reaffirm our commitment to the core values represented by the good of the college and the benefit of our students. Thank you.
Friends and members of the community of Barberville and the surrounding area, I invite you to stand. The citizens of our community have a responsibility to provide a welcoming and supportive environment that encourages Union students to uphold the values represented by circles. And we recognize that we recognize when the Union College community lives up to these values and community as a whole is enriched. I invite you to respond. We, the citizens of Barberville and the larger community, welcome the fall 2023 incoming class. We accept our responsibility and we affirm our commitment to the core values represented by circles for the good of the college and the benefit of all Union students. You may be seated.
Hi, everybody. If the student leaders would please stand for me. The student leaders of Union College have a responsibility to represent the Union student body and to do so in a manner that upholds the core values represented by circles. We, the leadership of the student body, accept our responsibility and we affirm our commitment to the core values represented by circles. Union College.
Please, the class of 2027 may stand, please. Vaya, chicos. Bueno. Students of the class of 2027, you have heard the faculty, staff, students, and community pledge to teach, serve, support, and represent you, and to do so in a manner that reflects the core values represented by circles. Will you make a similar pledge? Will you invest mind, heart, and spirit to strengthen these values within you so that they are reflected in all you do and readily apparent to all who come to know you? We, the class of 2027, accept the responsibility to preserve the core values represented by circles. We affirm that these values will be reflected in all we do and apparent to all who come to know us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate the beginning of another semester. And now, as president of Union College, I proclaim the fall 2023 academic term officially in session. All right. Please stand. No, don't get rowdy. Please stand and join Union Harmony as we sing our alma mater. You will find the words on the back of your program. You will find the words on the back of your program. Following the alma mater, remain standing for Reverend Miller and the benediction. All right, here we go.
Class of 2027. I've been asked to bring a blessing, and you are already blessed. You're blessed that representatives from the campus and the community have made pledges to you, promising that we will do our jobs and live our lives in such a way that the core values of Union College might become your own values. And while we will not be perfect in doing that, that's what we are going to attempt to do. At some institutions of higher education, it's the academic disciplines and the intellectual pursuit that are the most important thing. And these things are important at Union. We have intellectual leaders, prize winners, committee chairs of national educational conferences, but at small colleges like Union College, the people who wind up coming to places like Union and staying are here because we think you are the most important thing about Union College. And so on behalf of the faculty and staff of Union, it's my pleasure to say that we are excited about you. We're excited for your potential. We're excited for who you can become. And in a few moments, we'll march from the chapel to the circle out front of campus, and a representative from the campus or the community will present you with your circle's medallion. And next year, if you come to opening convocation, please come to opening convocation next year. You'll see a new class be given these pledges for the first time, and you will remember the promises that we've made to you this evening. And 4 years from now, or however long it might take, at baccalaureate, the evening before you are granted your degree, I will say these words to you again, and your mind will be filled with faces and names of persons who have been your circle's inspirations, people who have inspired you to live a life of celebration, integrity, responsibility, civility, learning, engagement, and spirituality. And at that time, you will be invited to complete the circle. It will be your turn to present that medallion to someone who has given you support and encouragement during your time at Union. And so this evening, as you receive your medallion, you are receiving a token of our love. May God bless the giving and the receiving of these circles medallions. And now let us pray. Pour out your blessing, O God, upon the class of 2027 as they accept for themselves the values of Union College. May this place be the new home they need for their intellectual, spiritual, and physical development as they become the embodiment of these values to which we have all committed ourselves. Amen.